You might be thinking the bigger the drum, the lower the pitch. While that's mostly true, it's not quite that straightforward. Let's take a look at how the diameter of your drum affects its sound and what other things might be impacting the pitch. Let's start with the shell itself. The shell does have a pitch all its own. If you were to take both heads off and knock on it, it should resonate. It is true that all other things equal, a larger diameter drum will have a lower pitch. Why? Because there's less tension in the wood that's forming that shell. Let's take this piece of cardboard as an example. The smaller I make that diameter, the tighter I have to wrap it around, the more tension there is. As I start to loosen up on it, it naturally wants to go back to a larger size diameter. Now you might be inclined to see this and think, well, maybe this is the sole contributing factor to the pitch of the drum. But again, we're only dealing with just the shell so far, and even with regards to just the shell, it's not the only thing affecting its pitch. How many plies of wood were used and the thickness of those plies, the direction of those plies, the types of woods used, all of those things have an impact on how much tension there is on the shell and thus how high up the pitch is going to go. We'll go back to the importance of the construction of the shell in 1 minute. The next thing to consider are the heads on the drums. And yes, a large amount of the overall pitch you hear comes from how much tension are on those heads. And yes, a larger drum head will generally mean a lower pitch. So how does the shell come into play here besides the fact that it supports different size heads? Well, for one, when you hit the drum head, it does cause the shell to resonate and contribute to the overall sound. But you also do have two limitations here. You're only going to be able to crank up those heads so far. You're only going to be able to make them so tight before you risk damaging the hardware on those drums. You'll also only be able to lower the pitch so far before there's just not enough tension on the head to be able to sustain a note. There are some tricks you can employ here, such as using a coated head instead of clear. That'll help cut down on how much high frequencies get resonated from the head. But overall, if you go down too low, you're reaching that lower limit that the shell can support. But as mentioned before, this lower limit in pitch you're going to be able to get, it's really a combination of shell diameter and how the shell is constructed. Something I often see is that drummers who want to get an extra low bass drum sound will opt to try to get a 23 or 24-inch kick instead of the standard size 22. But now you're having to pay more money for the larger drum and pay for a larger case, and it's a lot more work and space to be able to transport that. But you don't necessarily have to go with a larger bass drum if you want to get just a little bit more low end. For example, DW, they have these purple core options. So basically the shells have some very minimal amount of tension on them that allows you to tune the drums down just a little bit more. The opposite can be true, of course. Maybe you want higher pitches out of your drums, but you prefer the play or action of a larger drum head. Maybe you want the pitch of an 8-inch drum, but you don't necessarily want to have to deal with the size of an 8-inch drum. Again, take a look at the construction and see how you can get just a little bit more tension out of those shells. First, look at the woods that are used. Only get woods that are going to be harder. So maybe maple, but maybe also focus on oak or purple heart, which are both pretty hard woods. If given the option, get shells where the plies are all running in the high tension direction. Or if the plies are a little bit thicker, or if you really want to, get some reinforcing hoops or re-rings added to the drums. Note that all of these things can have other effects on the drums, so make sure you balance things out correctly. So my advice, start your search with the more common size shells. For your bass drum, even if you want it to be extra low, focus first on a 22 and see how changing the construction or the heads or the tuning can get you that lower pitch that you may want. Unless, of course, you want the aesthetic of a super large bass drum. If you're looking for a kick that's extra snappy, again, look for harder woods or other things where you can crank up the head a bit more. Unless, of course, you're gigging a lot and you just really need to have one of those tiny travel-sized bass drums. For your toms, start with even sizes, 10, 12, 14, 16. When you need something to be marginally higher or lower pitch, focus first on tuning, heads, and even shell construction. If you need something much higher or much lower pitch, try shifting all the shell sizes up 1 inch or down 1 inch. Also, think about whether or not you want an even change in pitch going from your rack toms to your floor toms, or if you want a bigger gap. If you are looking for a bigger gap, you could always try something like a 9-11, 14-16, or a 10-12, 15-17. For snare, you'll usually want to stick to a 14-inch. If you're doing a secondary snare, maybe get that one as a 13. It's also important to know that the drum's depth, it doesn't really have as much of an impact on the pitch of the drum. So then why would you care about the drum's depth? Well, you can find the answer to that question right over here. Until next time, peace.